Cardano Foundation, and a very warm welcome to you on our first webcast of 2018. So wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for joining us today. So good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening. You are in good company, I can assure you, because we have thousands of people logged in watching us today. The Cardano Foundation is an objective and independent entity with the core mission to nurture the growth and development of Cardano. So what does this actually mean? For example, audit and providing assurances around the software development project, also shaping legislation and commercial standards, plus the development of the amazing community which you are a part of. So thank you again for being here. So I'm just going to cover the format of today. We've had some amazing questions submitted by the community over on the forum, and so they've been voting on the best ones, and those are the ones we're going to be answering today. There's also been hundreds of other introductions. So first of all, may I introduce Michael Parsons, who is the chairman of the Cardano Foundation. Here we have Charles Hoskinson, who is the CEO and founder of IOHK. And I'd like to also introduce you to Duncan Coutts, who is the Director of Engineering from IOHK. So let's get on with some questions. So the first question that I'm going to pose to Michael is, how can non-technical people contribute and get involved on a voluntary basis? And this was asked by Workoff, so thank you for your question.
Well, there's a whole plethora of things that anyone can do to join and learn about Cardano if you're non-technical. The first one is you can join the forum and chat channels on Cardano Hub, and that's open to anyone to join. Second one is I recommend you follow our Twitter accounts. We've got about roughly just over 250,000 followers on 5 or 6 Twitter accounts. I'll just say what they are. The first one is the Cardano Foundation, and that's at Cardano Stiftung. The second one is at AdaCoin_, and the third one is at Cardano_ for the Cardano protocol. Also, there's a Twitter account for myself and also Charles Hoskinson, and there's also a very significant Twitter account for the Cardano community, and that's at Cardano.com, and that's got almost 75,000 followers, but together there's about 250,000 followers. So if you follow those Twitter accounts and read the tweets, you'll learn quite a lot of what's happening on an up-to-date and relevant basis. Thirdly, you can also write a blog. You could write an article on Steemit. You can write an article on Medium. And fourthly, you can look at us on our Facebook page and our LinkedIn page and Reddit page. Those are the ways that you can join the community and learn about Cardano if you're a non-technical person.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. So our second question, and the first question to Charles today. So what are the future plans, Charles, to be more user-friendly and accessible for all? The current process of purchasing ADA via BTC is led by Jordan Farr. So thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. So those are 2 questions. So one is a question of accessibility and user-friendliness. So that's with respect to, I assume, using the currency. And then there's another question about how does one acquire ADA and how do we make that as easy as possible? Okay, so with respect to the first question, that's something that organically happens over time as we learn a little bit more about what our users' needs are, the systems our users have, and also try to get more mobile support for Cardano. At the moment, the official client is the Daedalus wallet, and the Daedalus wallet is a desktop-only client. So it works on Windows and Mac, hopefully soon on Linux. But at some point, we would like to not only make Daedalus more user-friendly, but we'd also like to work hard to get a mobile wallet onto Android and to iOS. But that's going to take a little bit of time. Once that's occurred, I think it'll be quite easy for people to interface and use the token. Now, with respect to acquisition of ADA, that's a concern a little bit outside of the scope of IOHK, but succinctly, that's directly connected to the amount of exchanges that we have. So right now we have a smaller set of exchanges, principally Binance and Bittrex, that are trading ADA, and over time more exchanges will support Cardano, and we should see a large influx of new exchanges that include fiat pairs in Q1 and Q2 of this year in particular. Once those materialize, then what happens is a second layer market forms. The shapeshifts and other types of services that specialize in making it easier for everyday people to purchase without having to buy an entire exchange account. Also, you tend to see a local Bitcoin style market materialize as well, so there's more peer-to-peer trading that occurs. So after we finish some remedial work and some technical debt reduction for Cardano, we believe that the next wave of exchanges will join, and once that occurs, we think that very naturally it'll become easier for people to acquire ADA on the secondary market.
A very good answer, thank you so much. So question 3, and Duncan, your first question of the webcast. So I'm a developer on Cardano. How far away are we from developer tools, and is there anything that people can do to prepare for prototype and testing? And this is submitted by Small Caps on the forum, so thank you, Small Caps, whoever you are.
Right. Okay. So so deploying on our system. So we've talked about in our roadmap a little bit already. Smart contract platform, and the thing that our strategy is that we have a backwards compatibility story. So in the long term, we're going to have newer, cooler smart contract systems, but we at least are going to bring everybody with us. So people who've been developing for the Ethereum platform, so Solidity, and in due time other smart contract languages that target the EVM. So our backwards compatibility story is that we will support EVM style languages, and we will have an EVM style VM. It's you might have seen it on the roadmap. This thing called Yele, and it's basically, from the point of view of the developer, it's basically like the EVM, but better in various ways. But it means that it will support Solidity, and so then that means that your story is, how do you start right now? Well, if you're using Solidity, then you're already in a good position. Using the existing tools that currently work on Ethereum, that same language we'll be able to compile to, in future, we'll be able to compile to our platform. So yeah, so the first thing is continue to use Solidity. Later down the line, there'll be more interesting languages as well, ones that we think are better, but we will at least support the major existing ones. So yeah, that's the first point. Continue to use Solidity, and we will when we get closer to the time, we will then release our tools for compiling from Solidity into our VM system. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else that's going to be particularly exotic at the beginning. We're more exciting languages. Yeah, do you think that covers it?
I think it does, and people can stay up to date with what's happening via some of the social channels and on the forums and on Reddit, like Michael said. So that's the kind of thing we'll be telling people in the future, isn't it? So that's definitely the best way to keep up to date. So that's a great answer. Thank you, Duncan. So Michael, your second question. So what will be the main focus for the daily use case of Cardano / ADA, and will the emphasis be as a currency or possibly enterprise applications? And this has been submitted by Megawind, a very good name. So thank you for your excellent contribution.
Well, thank you for that question. It's probably a bit too early to give a full answer because the protocol is not fully developed, but I'll give you the answer as it stands. When Cardano was developed, it was meant to produce the best in class of all existing cryptocurrencies, which are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum, the Bitcoin token was only designed to be a value transfer or currency token. The Ethereum token was designed to open up the smart contract capability and be a token to have use cases for the blockchain. With Cardano, the token called ADA is actually a digital asset, and it can be used as a value transfer mechanism, as a currency, or it could be used, or can be used, will be used as a token to facilitate use of the blockchain. However, it's impossible to predict how that might be used in the future. I'll give you a guess. I would suggest that we may well be, people may well be using the Cardano blockchain to issue ICOs in the same way that Ethereum is used to issue ERC20 compliant tokens. Ethereum suffers from a little problem with that because of the congestion on the network, but with Cardano, we can get about 7 or 8 confirmations within just a couple of minutes. So I think that one of the best use cases would be if the ICO market takes off in a more productive blockchain protocol to do that. But of course, there are many, many other applications of blockchain technology, including identity, security, property rights, transfer of everything. And those will emerge in the future as the technology improves and developers come on board to help us with that.
That is a great answer. Thank you very, very much, Michael. So Charles, your second question, if I may, and this is submitted by Rollerbirdie. It's always at this point you think, my goodness, you know, thank God we haven't got any really rude names of the people who've got the most popular votes on the question. So I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Rollerbirdie. So Charles, your question. What are Cardano's or your thoughts and strategy to stay relevant in this incredibly rapidly evolving industry? Is there no fear that other crypto projects may lean on Cardano's already peer-reviewed technology and deliver a similar product faster, making Cardano obsolete?
Sure. The type of work that we do at IOHK and with the foundation and with our academic partners is enormously difficult to replicate for 3 reasons. One, it's difficult because the collection of people who can do this work is very small. So once you've obtained a critical mass, there's just less people to hire to do that. 2, because it's difficult to understand how to do this work quickly and efficiently. Generally speaking, when you go through a peer review process or you go through a process involving the use of formal methods, people don't rate projects in terms of days, weeks, or even months. They tend to look at the years and the decades. So, you know, people are welcome to come and compete, but if they are not optimized to compete, then it's going to be quite difficult for them to enjoy the timelines that we've been able to accomplish. And 3, it's less about the technology in general and less about what's been created and more about the community, the industry, and the relationship that you have with the community and the industry. If you're to look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Ripple, any of this technology, at any moment, anybody can copy it, 100%. It's sitting in a GitHub repository. They just click a button, they forked it, and now they have all your code. Congratulations. But they don't have your community and your people.
But it gives you, you know, a good first step. So yeah, no, I'm sure that we will end up having Visual Studio integration there.
He sounds like he's a .NET developer.
That's a good answer, Duncan. Thank you very, very much. Michael, so third question for you, submitted by Java Ronin. So wherever you are in the world, a big hello from us all here. At which part of the roadmap will the debit card integration be available?
Yeah. What a cryptocurrency debit card is. It is prior to cryptocurrencies, all debit cards, if you have a debit card in, say, euros or dollars, the backup currency against that has to be the same currency as the debit card. So if you have a debit card in euros, you must have a bank account in euros. You can't have a bank account in dollars or in. With a cryptocurrency debit card, you have funding in cryptocurrency, in this case ADA would be, funding a dollar or sterling or euro bank account. Now, recently the main players in that were Zappo, CryptoPay and Wirex, and they were going through a third-party provider. The third-party provider is based in Gibraltar, but a few weeks ago, a few days ago actually, the provider was advised by Visa with no notice that all the facility was being pulled immediately. So that lets people high and dry. So at the moment, it's very difficult to engage with Visa or MasterCard to get a new cryptocurrency debit card. That being said, we are Cardano, and we think we can do it. We are in negotiations, and we've had approval from a third-party provider and a debit card company based in the Far East, and that's ongoing. And I expect that to be possibly in place certainly before the end of this year, or certainly by Q3, but that's an estimate for now.
Thank you very much indeed. Charles,
Yes.
your third question, and this is submitted by Just Reading Yay. I hope I've pronounced that kind of right. So hello to you, wherever you are.
It's a good name.
It's a good name, isn't it? Yeah, some good names here. There are a lot of other cryptocurrencies that drive the same road as Cardano. Do you see them as a threat? How do you plan to expand your technology lead? Is there a technology lead at all? Or are all competitors at the same waypoint with Cardano?
Oh, no. We're walking a very different road. So
Are we on the motorway rather than the sort of lane?
for most of the altcoin space, what generally happens is people start from somewhere. So in the first generation, they started from Bitcoin and they forked it. So you had the Litecoins and the others, and it's still being done. For example, Zcash started as a fork of Bitcoin, and then some people fork Ethereum, and some people fork NXT, and some people fork BitShares and so forth, and they just go down that road. We just decided, that road doesn't look comfortable. Let's go out into the wilderness, with all the brush and the bears and the tigers and trail entirely. It's really ridiculously difficult to use a peer review process and try to compete in an agile marketplace. For example, when we started working on Ouroboros, to go from idea to paper to peer review to implementation in under a year, which is what we did, not only surprised our own people, it surprised the entire cryptographic community. Generally, these things are done in a matter of maybe 2 years, 3 years, and so forth. So we have built a collection of unique capabilities at IOHK that give us the ability to pursue this. Now, the advantage is that now that we're going down this road, it's incredibly difficult for other people to copy that or to imitate that, because it takes about 2 years to build enough infrastructure to even try. Then you have to get good at it. Then you have to have the relationships. So we're starting to see a great degree of acceleration. We did Ouroboros. Now we have Ouroboros Praus. We have other protocols coming out, and we're publishing papers at a rate of every few months. And these papers are getting into peer review very quickly. In fact, Praus was just accepted for a major conference. We'll be making an announcement soon about which one. So that's very exciting. So the other side of it is the engineering side, and this was equally difficult because we didn't choose a fun, happy, easy to understand and use language for the majority of developers like JavaScript. We chose the elegant, concise, magical language of Haskell, and Haskell, Lisp, and a few others are kind of like the lightsabers of the programming community. So as a consequence, you can do amazing, cool, beautiful things, but you also can chop your leg off pretty quickly if you're not so careful, or it requires quite a bit of training to use properly, I should say. So with that respect, it's actually been a challenge, but it's also been a fun challenge, and something that we as a company and through our partners like Well-Typed have learned a great degree about how to write protocols of this nature in Haskell. And again, we're starting to see acceleration. So the second half of this year in particular, we're going to reap a lot of the benefits that Haskell tends to have. When you talk about a programming language that in some cases has a factor of 10 less lines of code, you can accomplish in 10,000 lines of code what Bitcoin does. You can accomplish so much more in terms of testing and maintainability and all of these other things. And we will see that within this year, which means these protocols that live on paper will be much easier and faster for us to implement than our competitors. Furthermore, because of the nature of Haskell, it's kind of like a one-for-one. Haskell looks a lot like math, and the papers are a lot like math, so that translation is much faster for us. The other thing is that we're still learning how to do is how much assurance is necessary. So you have things like the SCL4 microkernel project, which is a very high assurance, rigorous approach that took several years and many millions of dollars. We probably don't have enough time to be able to do that for our core protocols. Okay. On the other hand, it's very important for us to do something. So we're trying to figure out where on that spectrum we want to live, and it's a game of iteration. So what happens is you release Haskell, then you do some medium assurance thing, and then you keep going about, and at some point you revisit what you've already done, and you can gradually turn up the assurance level. So not only will Cardano move quickly, but then the older parts of Cardano will eventually be replaced out with higher and higher assurance components. And Haskell lets you do that where and when you're ready, which means we're going to have faster code, higher quality code, more secure code, and this becomes more like permanent infrastructure. you know, if Cardano is real serious and we're really going to be the financial stack for 3 billion people who don't have one, then we're looking not in terms of weeks, we're looking in terms of decades. You know, TCP/IP has been around for a very long time, nearly 4 decades. So similarly, I'd love for this protocol to be around for 4 decades. So we have a moral obligation to make sure that the stuff that becomes bedrock is built correctly. So I think overall we're quite competitive. We're walking a very different trail. It creates unique complexities that we have to deal with. For example, we have a moral obligation to make sure our code is audited. You know, if you're writing Java code or C++ code, I guarantee you every Java and C++ developer who doesn't like us would go and read our repo and announce to the world all of our sins. That's just pretty common in this space. Very few people read our repo because very few people program in Haskell, and the ones who do usually work for us or are related to us. Somebody to read the repo with a degree of rigor and a degree of objectivity, which is why the foundation's around with their relationship with FP Complete, and those reports will soon come out. That's just a great thing, and that's an industry standard that ought to materialize. The last thing I'll say about agility is that there's 2 ways to look at it. One is to look at it from a competitive, this is a product and our product must win, and another is to look at it from a philosophical viewpoint. To beat Cardano, what does that mean? It means that you're doing better science, you're writing better code, and you're ultimately more useful than us. That's our hope. If that's the case, that's great. Because what that ultimately means is we've given the world a much better protocol, and we've given the world a much better way to do things, and we've accomplished our mission. So from that perspective, I don't mind if a competitor somehow finds a way to outcompete us because it means we've made the world a better place. But I think hands down, looking at the industry as a whole, the players in the industry, the priorities that the players have, and the relationships that the players have, we're light years ahead of everybody. Yeah, light years. And we'll continue to aggressively fight so that we stay in that position.
Thank you for a terrific answer. So question 9, and this is for Duncan. What does the transition process look like if an Ethereum-based project wants to switch over to Cardano's blockchain? And this is submitted by Sidar MSH, Sidar Mush. So thank you very much.
So actually, this question is very similar to the earlier one about the relationship between, you know, how do you go from Ethereum into Cardano, and so this is really all about the smart contract languages again. And as I said earlier, you know, we have a story about, you know, the legacy support, which is the existing languages, Solidity, and a couple others. And yeah, we have an EVM-like system as the first thing that we're coming out with for our smart contract platform, and so it will support Solidity and it will support a couple other languages. Not immediately, but Solidity will be the first one. So, yeah, so as I said earlier, the answer is stick with Solidity for the moment, and we will then provide a compiler from Solidity into our VM, which is, you know, very similar in spirit to the EVM. So there's no, we're expecting 0 to very minimal source code changes to work with our system.
Right.
You might need to tune like the amount of gas you have to spend for a particular contract, but you know, Solidity contracts will port across very, very straightforwardly.
Right. And it's also important to point out that the majority of software currently deployed on Ethereum is junk. And this is not an insult, it's just a reality of where the platform is at and the fact that most people used it as a tinkering platform. There's a great paper called Making Smart Contracts Smarter or something like that from Loy Liu, where he used an analysis tool on all of the deployed contracts on Ethereum and discovered, I think, around 40% of them have critical flaws. And this was about last year. So there's a long way to go. And the reality is the vast majority of developers in the world are not Solidity developers. So it's kind of funny when people run around and say, oh, we have all the developers. It's like, you have all the C# and Java guys? No, they don't, because they can't support these languages, which is why we are so committed to things like K and semantics-based compilation. Our goal with what we do with Cardano CL is to be language agnostic in the most broad general sense possible. So whether that be Viper or Bamboo or these new languages that Ethereum Foundation is developing, or legacy languages like Solidity, or traditional languages like JavaScript and Java and C#, we would like to support all of them, and we'd like to support them in a very intelligent way, meaning that once we pay the resource cost to bring it into our ecosystem, there's no additional cost to continue support for that language. Now, that requires some innovation in terms of computer science. That requires a lot of original and very exotic and new engineering, which is why we're partnered with Runtime Verification, and they're the world leading expert. And they've done this for NASA and with DARPA and many other organizations throughout the existence of their company. So that's exciting to me, to bring that kind of two-phase approach. One of things, if you want to write high assurance smart contracts, that's what the Plutus research line is all about. And then the other side of it is saying, let's give some compatibility promises to people, whether that be EVM compatibility or Solidity compatibility or your favorite language. That could be Java or Go. It's going to take a bit of time to do that, but just like our engineering, just like our science, after we get that pump primed, we'll see accelerating returns.
Shall I add to that a bit more about? Yeah, I mean, as we were saying, we have the first thing we're coming out with is about the EVM and Ethereum style languages, but we're looking at other languages. So there's an interesting trade-off here, right? So you've got languages like Java, JavaScript, which have hundreds of thousands of people who know those languages. But on the other hand, and that's good, that's great. So that means that more people can come over to use their experience with those languages to write smart contracts. But on the other hand, what's special about smart contracts is that you're dealing with a lot of money often, and so the correctness is really, really important. And those traditional languages are not necessarily always the best for correctness. It's hard to reason about those languages. They weren't designed for it, particularly things like JavaScript. So we are also looking at applying more programming language technology to give us like Plutus, to give us languages that are a bit different from existing languages like Solidity, which are applying more ideas from programming language theory to give us languages which are a bit different, but in many ways simpler and easier to reason about, so that it should be possible for us to avoid some of the well-known problems that we've seen with smart contracts in this space. And I think one of the really exciting ones, that we are also looking at, an idea that we're pursuing. So we've got Plutus, which is a lambda calculus style language. And then we've also got another one which we're looking at, which is a bit different from any others that are deployed at the moment, which is based on a very simple model of financial contract. Not as a smart contract language, they've been using it as a way of describing financial contracts between individuals. And we think that's another interesting idea that we're pursuing, which will give us, for the kind of contracts it can describe, it gives you a very simple, very easy to understand, very easy to reason about language for describing these things, but doesn't let you do lots of crazy other complicated things. So there's some interesting, I think, innovative work that we can do there in the smart contract space. So it's not just like Java, C, Solidity. There's actually more interesting things that we can do there that have other interesting trade-offs.
It's like one of those isn't it funny scenarios where you say, hey, I want you to go build something for me, and here's this toolbox with a screwdriver and a hammer. Go have some fun. They say, but I'm a carpenter. They say, oh, no, you got your screwdriver and hammer. And that's where we're at right now in the smart contract world. The tools that people are using are not the ones they want to use. They're the tools that have been given to them. And so we have an obligation to increase the size and robustness of that toolbox. And that's everything from bringing in existing languages to designing special purpose tools specifically for things like financial contracts and so forth. And that's a big priority of our PLT group.
There's a whole academic discipline of programming language design. And this is exactly the place for it. It's this new space where there's new languages being defined. And for the most part, existing smart contract languages are not really making good use of that, multi-decade history, academic discipline of how should you design programming languages for this purpose, that purpose, or whatever. And we can, we have people who that is their, been their academic training, and we can apply those kinds of ideas. So there's lots of interesting stuff we can do there. So, I've talked a lot about, the legacy we will bring in, we will run Solidity programs, but that's kind of like, the first thing. as we go along, we'll be applying much more interesting things, I think.
That's great to hear. Thank you, guys. And we have one last question, and that's from Jason ABC, and this is for Charles. Thank you, Jason. Cardano is billed as a third-generation crypto.
Mm-hmm.
What does the team think will be a fourth generation? And is Cardano flexible, modular enough to support this?
That's what I hope, or long retired or long dead. It's kind of funny. I've been through two generations, and generations I've defined in a very functional property-based sense. So first generation was saying, can we construct digital scarcity and can that achieve market value using this weird thing called blockchain technology, whatever the heck that is. Today, it seems obvious. Oh, yeah, of course you can trade these digital tokens. But back in the day, we didn't know. The first year of Bitcoin was worthless. I mean, there'd be people come up to you and say, you want to buy 5,000 Bitcoin for $20? You say, get away, you weird person. Now that's like the best deal of your life, right? So that was the first generation. And once that question got answered, it became more of a utility question. So it started philosophical, and then it became utility oriented, meaning, I'll buy that these systems are useful, but they can't really do much yet. We'd like them to do more. So it was a question of smart contracts at that point. And that's what Ethereum contributed to the conversation, was saying we can reimagine the way a transaction can run, and you can now do all kinds of real cool, interesting things with transactions. The kinds of things that Michael did throughout his whole career, which is, it's not optional, it's just how financial relationships are. But then we ran into this, we call it the CryptoKitties problem of scale. And basically, these systems, by their design and nature, really can't be used or useful at the billion person range. They're okay when you're talking about thousands, but when you enter that spectrum, they just break down and everything falls apart. And all the security guarantees and all the philosophical guarantees about decentralization, by necessity, start eroding. So the great challenge is building these systems to work at scale. And it's not simple, because every time you try to do that, there's a million little things you have to worry about very carefully, and you may inadvertently have broken your performance or broken your security guarantees or introduced some degree of false decentralization, in other words, some hidden centralization in the system to make it work properly. Now, once you've removed all of that, I think from a generational standpoint, we're now in a position to talk more about the infrastructure that the cryptocurrencies run upon, because we've already accomplished at that point all of the goals. We've become scalable. We can work with billions of people. That's a commodity question at this point now. It's just a matter of making it better. The next version of Apache, the next version of Zookeeper, the next version of whatever your tech happens to be. It's no longer sexy in that respect. And now we're talking about, how do we do lending? How do we do value stable currencies? How do we do remittances? How do we do identity? How do we get these things to work well on a phone, for example? How do we introduce new capabilities, whether it be programming language capabilities or multi-party computation or trusted hardware, these new things that we don't currently have in the cryptocurrency space, that if they were added would either give you more safety and security, or they would give you offline off-chain payments, or they would give you the ability to scale damn near indefinitely because of the nature of how those protocols work. I think that is more a meaningful conversation than what will be the fourth generation. Now, we live in a very competitive environment, and after Cardano becomes the market leader, hopefully this year, there's going to be another person riding off from the distance saying, I'm the fourth generation, and trying to outclass us. And maybe they'll have some amazing, great ideas. I hope that they do. And then we'd love to compete with them, just like Ethereum is going to compete with us, and Bitcoin core devs are going to compete with us. It'll make us all better. So I'm not chasing the fourth generation at the moment. I'm just trying to figure out how to make the third generation happen. And boy, it's hard. It's an order of magnitude harder than the second generation was. And the second generation was an order of magnitude harder than the first generation. You get a lot of complexity creep here. Anything you want to add to that, Michael? Or?
Yeah, if you compare it to the browser technology, before Google, there was Netscape Navigator, then there was Alta Vista, and Alta Vista paid several $100,000 to Alta Vista in San Francisco to buy the trademark off them, because they were a photography shop. And then along came Google. Now, if you ask Google what is a next generation browser, even 10, 12 years ago, they would say we are the last generation. And I actually believe that there isn't a fourth or fifth generation. I think Cardano is the last generation, and it will be a iterative process. People will come on, but I don't think. I think they will build it and make it better and better and better, and Cardano will become the Google of the blockchain and cryptocurrency token world.
Yeah, just like TCP/IP, right? We never talk about the next generation of TCP/IP.
Right.
Yeah,
It's just iteratively improved.
right. Well,
Can I add something to that
Sure.
as well? So, I mean, a perspective that I have is that, I spent most of my career in the Haskell world. And I think the interesting analogy here is that with Haskell, so, the first sort of commercially useful version of Haskell was 20 years ago. And it was, at that point, it was like cutting edge, a combination of research and practicality. And it was cutting edge 20 years ago at that time. And that same implementation, the same software, the same tools there, have been continuously evolved over the last 20 years, and they're still cutting edge now. And how have they been able to do that? It's not been like replaced by a new thing. It's just the same bit of software has been just continually improved and added to and made better and incorporated everything. And how'd that work? It's because there was a very close connection between research, development, and implementation. And so academics would write new papers, come up with new crazy things, and they, within a year or so, get prototyped and incorporated into this system. And so you have this very quick feedback cycle, very close connection between research and application implementation, and people starting to use these things for real. So it's that link between the academic side of the community and the application side, building stuff, using stuff. And that has been an extremely successful recipe for the Haskell community. And I think that's what's very interesting about what IOHK are doing, is that we've got this very close connection between research and applying it and getting it into the hands of developers. So yeah, I think the answer could be that there might not be a fourth generation. It's just a continuous process of improvement, of continually having brilliant ideas and incorporating them into the system and getting them into the hands of users, and then seeing what works and what doesn't, right. And then ideas that don't work are thrown away, ideas that do work are improved. So yeah, I think it could be continuous like that. It doesn't have to be like this finishes and the next one starts.
And also remember adoption, billions of users. So if we get to that point, I mean, it's really hard because of just market dynamics to replace that standard. No matter how much money Microsoft spends on Bing, I think they're over 25 billion now, they can't seem to get any market share on Google. And in some cases, Bing is actually better than Google technology, and they buy the latest and greatest things, and maybe they move their market percentage by a point or two. It's the same for Android versus iOS penetration, same for Linux versus Windows, where there's obvious superiorities of one platform over the other, but the market share just doesn't move. So markets tend to be sticky once they reach a certain critical mass. And third generation means you've reached that mass and you can service that mass. So our hope is to become the standard. And then, as Duncan has mentioned, we have a moral obligation to make sure that we have a tight feedback loop that allows it to evolve and become relevant, so we don't end up falling into the Windows trap of making life difficult for many people.
Very good. That brings us to the end of the actual questions submitted by the people of the community, of which you're a part, and we really do thank you for you tuning in to watch. We've got just a few minutes, just if possible, to talk a little bit about the roadmap. If you had any comments, the roadmap was updated around 10 days ago. If there's anything you'd like to talk about there, or we can wrap up and bid our farewells.
Anything about the roadmap? I'm sure you can elaborate here.
So the roadmap is kind of like a gradually illuminated room. You enter into a dark room, no light whatsoever, and then somebody lights a candle. Now we can see a few things, and then one day the lights will just go on and we can see everything. It's our best guess of what we can do and when we can do it. And every month, it's very important that we're held accountable to trying to refine things a bit. So you'll see things like Q2, and then eventually you'll see things like April or June or whatever, and eventually you'll see a countdown timer counting towards that goal. So that's one way to use the roadmap. The other way is to kind of discuss about things that are our priorities. For example, we're really interested in quantum resistant signatures. Our best guess is probably Bliss, but there are dozens to consider, and we've already built some great relationships with some of the top quantum crypto guys in the world. And we're going to be able to, at some point make some announcements about not only adding quantum resistant signature support, but also hardening Ouroboros against a quantum adversary. So the roadmap will eventually reflect those progress points as they materialize. I felt it was very important from an organizational and from a project perspective that we be accountable to our community. And accountability goes beyond just a roadmap. It means that you do things like weekly updates. It means that you try to moderate as many channels as possible. It means that every month you give people your best guess about where the project is at as a whole. It means that you have independent third-party auditing on the scientific claims. It means you go through peer review, which is the gold standard of science. On the technology side, do what the foundation has done with FP Complete and start providing audit reports on where our code is. And those are not 100% positive, those reports. There's a good, a bad, and an ugly there, as there should be.
Yep, holds me honest.
Yeah, it keeps Duncan honest, but also it creates that standard of quality to the community, and it builds a relationship and trust with the community, saying this is not just marketing. This is an honest, transparent project that is seeking to do something, and they're trying as hard as they can to be legitimate in terms of how they approach things. So that's how I would use the roadmap, is to say it's a steer that becomes gradually more refined over time. So the things we've already announced will become more specific month by month. Then you'll see new things materialize on that roadmap as they become available. And eventually, as we get very close to something, we'll have more than one timer. And those timers will count down towards the release, similar to how we counted down towards the release to the Byron release. And so forth. And if used from that perspective, I think that people will not be let down. Now, to manage expectations, the roadmap ought not to be viewed as this revelation from the oracles, like Moses coming down with the stone tablets, telling people what the world is going to be like. So please don't hype it. Roadmap that's going to change everything. In fact, more often than not, when we have something special like that, we announce it not on the roadmap, but out of band, usually through a press release or some sort of media event or something like that. And we try to announce those things in the middle of the month, or not towards the ends where the roadmap comes. So it's more of a project accountability feature than an announcement mechanism for new, sexy, incredible things, and should be treated that way.
Michael, anything you'd like to add from Foundation's perspective from the roadmap?
Yes. On the question of how you can come into the community, I forgot to mention that we're doing a significant amount of research with a company called GN, and the title of the research is Distributed Futures, and we're spending several $1 million over the next 3 to 5 years on that research. That will form an adjunct with what IOHK are doing on the more technical research. We're doing technical research, some technical research, we're doing regulatory research, taxation research. We've already published 3 reports, which you can find if you go online and Google distributed futures. The last one was geo-stamping, because everyone is saying, oh, blockchain is immutable. You can tell that you've signed it here and you signed it at this time, but it doesn't tell you the place where you've signed it. So we've cracked that nut, I think, and we can geo-stamp any blockchain soon, and let people know where they've signed it, not just when they've signed it. And the second thing we're doing, about 18 months ago, we had this idea in the foundation that we ought to have a hardware secure wallet for the ADA token, and we're working with one of the leading hardware wallet providers, with a research company and technical company in Brighton, in England, and we are hoping to produce a hardware wallet sometime later this year or as soon as possible. And that will allow people who hold significant amounts of ADA, or significant for their mind, in a hardware wallet, which is much more secure than having it on an online wallet.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think that brings us to the close of the very first Cardano Webcast of 2018. I'm sure we're going to be doing some more in the future. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. On one of the social channels, tell us where you were tuning in from, so we'd love to know what country you were. So say hello to us on Twitter, or on the forum, or on Reddit. I'd like to extend a huge thanks for giving up their time this afternoon, Michael Parsons, Chairman of the Cardano Foundation, Charles Hoskinson, CEO and founder of IOHK, and Duncan Coutts, Director of Engineering at IOHK. My name's John Moss, and thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you, guys.